In 1798, nestled in the quiet hills of Emmitsburg, Maryland, construction began on a Catholic medical university that would promise salvation through science. St. Thomas Medical University was hailed as a holy fusion of divine purpose and anatomical progress, founded by Irish immigrant Dr. Michael Walsh. Towering and charismatic, Walsh promised to train a generation of Catholic doctors to serve America's swelling immigrant population. Alongside him were his sharp, stoic wife, Dr. Margaret Walsh, a rarity in the male-dominated field, and his younger brother, Dr. James Walsh, a meticulous anatomist whose lectures were whispered about in reverent tones. Together, they would create something that appeared holy, but hid hell beneath its floors. Within just 5 years, St. Thomas developed a reputation for producing unmatched surgeons with an almost unnatural understanding of the human body. While other universities struggled to source usable cadavers, St. Thomas boasted an endless supply, fresh, whole, and perfectly preserved. European universities, desperate for high-quality specimens, began reaching out with lucrative offers. What they didn't know was that these pristine bodies weren't acquired through legal channels. They were cultivated, groomed, drugged, and killed with surgical precision by the very educators entrusted to teach life-saving medicine. The victims were always the same: young, poor, and far from home. They came from Boston, Philadelphia, even rural Canada, hopeful, devoted, and hungry for a future in medicine. Dr. Margaret Walsh, in her role as dean, kept exhaustive records on every student's finances, family ties, and psychological vulnerabilities. Students who fit the profile, no close friends, struggling academically, and families too distant to investigate, were quietly invited into advanced mentorships. These sessions took place late at night in the school's restricted lower levels, accessible only through a concealed door behind James Walsh's office bookshelf. Inside the secret laboratory, what awaited was not education, but execution. James Walsh, ever the perfectionist, had developed a method that allowed for silent, untraceable death. Students were administered a precise dose of chloroform under the guise of surgical training. The dosage wasn't enough to knock them out temporarily. It was enough to stop their breathing entirely, without a single mark of violence. Their bodies were then drained, embalmed with a chemical mixture of arsenic and mercury, and packed in wax-sealed crates. These were labeled as medical specimens and shipped to institutions in Edinburgh, Paris, and London for upwards of $500 apiece. As the operation expanded, the Walsh family created a web of forged letters, falsified records, and convenient explanations. Families received messages supposedly written by their sons, saying they were abandoning medicine for the priesthood, missionary work, or mental asylum treatment. Local law enforcement, particularly Sheriff William Hawkins, trusted the Walshes implicitly. After all, they donated generously to the church, treated townsfolk for free, and hosted grand holiday sermons on healing and holiness. Suspicion had no fertile ground in Emmitsburg, but not everyone bought the story. In 1811, Father Timothy O'Malley, a hard-nosed Jesuit liaison from New York, began investigating after receiving dozens of concerned letters from Catholic families whose sons had disappeared. He arrived at St. Thomas under the guise of giving a guest sermon, but quietly interviewed students and inspected records. What he found was deeply unsettling. Dozens of letters in identical handwriting, missing academic files, and a disturbing number of students who vanished without farewells. He demanded to see the lower laboratories. Walsh agreed, but only showed him staged rooms filled with legal cadavers and dusty tools. Father O'Malley submitted a report to Catholic authorities, citing potential misconduct and recommending a full investigation. But the Walshes were too well connected. The church dismissed his warnings, and the priest was quietly reassigned. For the next 2 decades, the murders continued, though the family reduced their kill count to 4 victims per year and tightened their cover stories. By 1834, the Walsh Dynasty had amassed over $800,000 in European payments, nearly $25 million today, and shipped more than 150 bodies overseas, each one a stolen dream wrapped in linen and deceit. It all unraveled when a dock worker in Baltimore cracked open a mislabeled crate headed for Scotland. Inside were three perfectly preserved corpses, one of whom he recognized as Caleb Turner, a student whose family had pleaded for answers just months before. That single discovery led to a federal raid on St. Thomas Medical University. But by the time investigators arrived, the Walsh family had vanished. The secret lab was destroyed, records burned, and every trace of the operation scrubbed clean. To this day, no one knows what became of the Walshes or where they fled. But their story remains one of the darkest stains on America's medical history. A tale where salvation was promised, but death was delivered. Decades later, when St. Thomas Medical University was converted into a seminary dormitory, workers discovered a sealed stone vault beneath the eastern wing. Inside were dozens of handwritten journals, surgical sketches, and portraits signed by Dr. James Walsh, depicting the faces of students marked for death. Most disturbing was a final entry from 1833, scrawled in a trembling hand. "The body is merely a shell. But if you understand the shell deeply enough, you can reach the soul." The vault was resealed by church officials, and its contents never made public. Their descendants hidden in plain sight, still practicing, still collecting, still learning. Medicine, after all, never forgets its most devoted students. In 1901, more than half a century after the university shut down, a team of renovation workers uncovered skeletal remains buried in uneven rows behind the school's chapel. Autopsies revealed crude surgical incisions, some clean, others frantic, as if done by different hands learning in real time. Among the bones were fragments of rosaries, belt buckles with school insignias, and a silver ring etched with the Walsh family crest. The discovery was quietly hushed up, with local officials claiming it to be the site of a forgotten cemetery. But medical historians believe the truth is far more sinister, that the Walshes not only murdered students, but trained newer recruits to carry on their practices, using real victims as test subjects. Today, the original St. Thomas building stands abandoned, cloaked in ivy and silence. Locals refuse to enter after sundown. Some say the floors still smell faintly of antiseptic and burnt hair. Others swear they've heard dragging footsteps and distant whispers echoing through the lower halls. A few brave souls have even reported seeing shadowy figures in white coats peering from broken windows, vanishing when approached. The Walsh family may have disappeared into the folds of history, but their legacy lives on, in myth, in memory, and perhaps in medicine itself, because what they created was never just a university. It was a sanctum of science wrapped in horror, America's most horrific medical scandal.